Alindra's morning should have been ordinary. It should have been like every other day. She woke up early, slipped into the kitchen before sunrise, and packed Ariella's little pink lunchbox with fresh fruit, a juice pouch, and the tiny sandwich her daughter always asked for. But today, her hand wouldn't stop shaking. She pressed her thumb against the lunchbox clasp, trying to snap it shut. The latch refused to catch. Her fingers trembled harder, and she could feel something inside her beginning to collapse, a quiet shudder she couldn't steady. A task she had done thousands of times was suddenly too heavy for her. Her breath caught, and the moment froze around her. This was the break. The small detail that told her life had shifted into something she wasn't ready to face. The doctor's voice, calm, practiced, and heartbreaking, replayed in her mind with painful clarity. "You have about 90 days left, Alindra." The words struck her again, sharp and cold. Her chest tightened. Her lungs pulled in air but refused to let it go easily. 90 days. Just 90 days to prepare her little girl for a world without her. She gripped the lunchbox so tightly her knuckles whitened, whispering under her breath, "Not now. Ari still needs me." If you've ever had life hit you so hard that your knees almost gave out, give this story a like so more people can find strength in it. Just as Alindra tries to steady herself, a knock sounds at the exam room door. Short, quiet, final. The doctor steps back inside, holding the printouts that confirm everything she had feared wasn't real. But it is real, and his eyes tell her what his words don't need to repeat. At that same moment, her phone vibrates. Ariella's school is calling. With trembling fingers, Alindra answers. Her daughter's small voice bursts through the speaker. "Mommy, when are you picking me up?" The two worlds, the one inside her heart and the one outside calling her to keep going, collide all at once. She swallows hard. How do you tell a child who depends on you that time is slipping away? A simple morning routine, buckling a lunchbox, becomes the moment her strength falters. Her truth surfaces silently. "I'm not ready to leave my baby behind." Anyone who has ever cared for someone deeply knows the fear of running out of time. But before Alindra tells anyone she's dying, she has one final, impossible request, one that will change a millionaire CEO's life forever. We do not reveal the request yet. We let the question echo. What do you do with the last 90 days of your life, when your biggest secret is also your daughter's only hope? Welcome to Mr. Stevens Stories, where powerful life lessons are shared through unforgettable storytelling. If you're new here, we're glad to have you. Subscribe and join us for more inspiring stories that motivate, uplift, and open the mind. And don't forget to comment the time and where you're watching this story from. The call from Ariella's school kept ringing in her ears long after the line disconnected. Not because her daughter had said anything unusual. Ariella had simply asked the question every child asks. "Mommy, when are you coming?" But today, the answer wasn't simple. Today, the question tightened around Alindra's heart like a quiet reminder of everything she stood to lose. She pressed the phone to her chest and closed her eyes. For a few slow seconds, she let the silence settle around her. Not the silence of peace, but the kind that comes when reality tilts and you're forced to stand still long enough to feel it. The doctor waited respectfully, giving her room to breathe. But no amount of breathing could make the news gentler. "Take whatever time you need," he murmured, stepping out again so she wouldn't feel watched. When the door shut, Alindra finally exhaled, a shaky breath that felt heavier than anything she'd ever carried. She stared at the exam table paper beneath her, wrinkled from where she had clenched her hands earlier. Everything in the room felt too bright, too clean, too normal for the storm she felt inside. Her thoughts went straight to Ariella, her soft curls, her bright laugh, her endless questions, the way she still slept with her favorite stuffed bunny tucked under her chin. 90 days. 90 days to prepare a child who still believed her mother could fix anything. A whisper left her lips. "How do I tell her?" But the truth was even harder than that. It wasn't just about telling Ariella. It was about preparing the world she would grow up in. A world where Alindra wouldn't be there to guide her, protect her, or remind her of the love she carried in every heartbeat. Her mind raced through all the unfinished pieces of her life. Not material things. Those barely mattered. It was the emotional pieces. The unanswered questions. The people she had avoided for years. The conversations she had pushed aside because they were too painful. And one person in particular, a man whose name she hadn't spoken out loud in a long time. A man tied to the secret she had kept for nearly 7 years. A man who had no idea Ariella existed. Her pulse flickered with nerves at the thought of him, not because she wished him harm, not because she wanted anything from him, but because he was the missing piece in Ariella's future. Her final request, the one she hadn't dared to say even to herself, hovered at the edge of her mind. If she had only 90 days, she couldn't leave the world without trying. But trying meant reaching out to a man whose life now stood miles above hers, a man known publicly for his money, his success, his power. A man who once knew her closely, intimately, before everything fell apart. Brant. The voice of the narrator returns, steady and warm. What Alindra doesn't know yet is that her next step will shake 2 lives at once. Her daughter's and the millionaire CEO who has no idea his world is about to change. A pause. Stay with us. Because the choice Alindra makes next is the kind that reshapes destinies. When Alindra finally stepped out of the exam room, the hallway seemed longer than usual, stretching out ahead of her like a road she wasn't sure how to walk. Her feet felt heavy, but her purpose pushed them forward. She clutched Ariella's lunchbox in one hand and her phone in the other, both symbols of the 2 worlds she was now balancing, the present she was still living, and the future she wouldn't see. Her heart squeezed at the thought. As she moved toward the elevator, she noticed the people around her, nurses chatting softly, visitors holding flowers, a father guiding his son by the hand. Life kept moving, unaware of the quiet countdown beginning inside her. For a split second, she wished she could freeze time, not to save herself, but to hold on to the moment she had left with more care. But time didn't pause. It didn't soften. It simply moved. Her phone buzzed again. This time a message from Ariella's school. Ariella is waiting in the office. Please let us know your arrival time. Alindra closed her eyes, steadying herself. No matter what news she had received, she was still a mother first. She still had to show up. She stepped outside into the daylight, letting the warm air brush against her skin. It grounded her, reminding her that she still had today, and today was enough to make one decision, a decision she had avoided for years. Ariella deserved answers. She deserved protection. She deserved the truth. But to give her those things, Alindra would have to confront the one chapter of her past she had sealed shut. Her pulse picked up again at the thought of Brant, the man whose name carried both old affection and old pain. A man who walked through life with confidence, wealth, and a reputation bigger than the city's skyline. A man who didn't know a little girl existed with his eyes, his expressions, and his stubborn streak. Alindra whispered to herself, she deserves a chance, even if it means facing him. The truth was simple. If she disappeared without doing anything, Ariella would grow up with questions she could never answer. But if she reached out to him, even once, her daughter might gain the support she would no longer be alive to give. That thought alone gave her strength she didn't realize she still had. This is where Alindra's journey begins, not in fear, but in a mother's determination. Before her time runs out, she must face the past she ran from and ask for something no parent wants. To ask of a stranger, especially when that stranger is the father her daughter never met. A soft pause. Stay with us, because the next step she takes will bring her closer to the man whose life is built on control, money, and power, yet completely unprepared for the truth she's about to bring into his world. This ends the Hook chapter. We now move into the foundational story with depth, emotion, romance-building tension, and your required structure. The sunlight felt too gentle for the kind of day she was living through. As Alindra stepped out of the hospital building, the warmth across her skin clashed with the cold truth sitting deep in her chest. She clutched Ariella's small lunchbox against her side, holding it like it was the last normal thing she had left. The simple snap-and-lock container had witnessed more laughter than sorrow. Tiny notes tucked inside, half-eaten strawberries, the occasional spilled juice pouch. But today, it had watched her fall apart. Her hands were steadier now, but only because she forced them to be. Her daughter needed her, today, tomorrow, and in every moment she still had breath to give. The doctor's voice stayed with her, not shouting, not echoing, just existing, heavy, flat, and unforgettable. You have about 90 days left, Alindra. She didn't try to push the words away. She had already tried that inside the exam room, and it nearly broke her. Instead, she allowed them to sit beside her like unwanted company. She started walking toward the parking lot, taking slow, measured steps as though hurrying would make the truth stronger. She didn't want to give it that power. A small breeze lifted the ends of her hair, carrying with it the afternoon sounds of Charlotte. The faint rumble of passing cars, the distant chatter of people going about their day, the murmur of a world that didn't know she was running out of time. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the school. Another reminder that while her world had cracked open, her daughter's world was still whole, and she needed to keep it that way for as long as she could. She opened the message quickly. "Ariella is still waiting. Please confirm your arrival." Elindra typed back a short reply, forcing her fingers to stay controlled. "On my way." There was no room today for falling apart. She reached her car, unlocked it, and slid behind the wheel. For a moment she rested her forehead on the steering wheel, letting her eyes close as she took in a slow breath. Not to calm herself, she knew calm wouldn't come. She just needed enough strength to move. Her thoughts shifted, carefully, reluctantly, to the one person she had avoided for almost a decade. Brant. His name alone stirred something complicated in her chest. Not longing, not anger, not regret. Something softer, deeper, like the echo of a life she once imagined but couldn't keep. Back then, before everything fell apart, she had adored him. Back then, the differences in their worlds, her warm, culturally rich black community and his polished, socially connected white circles, had seemed manageable. Their love had been a shelter all its own, but love wasn't the only thing life demanded. And when their worlds clashed, it was she who walked away, carrying a truth she never planned to reveal. Ariella, her daughter, her heartbeat, her whole future. The memory of the doctor stepping back into the exam room returned to her suddenly. The quiet knock, the papers in his hand, the kindness in his expression that made the diagnosis hurt. Even more. He hadn't said the words again, but he didn't need to. She saw everything in his eyes. 90 days. She couldn't afford hesitation anymore. She couldn't afford fear. She couldn't afford to leave this world without giving Ariella what she deserved. A father, not just a name on a birth certificate, because Ariella didn't even have that. Not just a man she once loved, but someone who could help guide her daughter through a life she would no longer be around to witness. And whether she liked it or not, that someone was Brant. She lifted her head from the steering wheel and stared ahead, her pulse steadying with every new realization. She wasn't reaching out for herself. That chapter between them had closed a long time ago. She was reaching out for her child, their child. Her daughter needed security. Her daughter needed family. Her daughter needed truth. And Elindra was running out of days to give her any of those things. She started the car. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she spoke quietly, almost too quietly to hear over the hum of the engine. It's time. It wasn't courage she felt. It was responsibility, an instinct that lived deeper than fear. She had always been Ariella's protector. Even as her body began to fail her, that instinct burned brighter than anything else. 5 minutes into the drive, she reached a red light. Her phone sat beside her in the cup holder, face down, screen dark. She picked it up. Her thumb hesitated over the screen, not because she doubted what she needed to do, but because sending this message would open a door she had kept closed for 8 long years. Her contact list was small: family, co-workers, school numbers. Brant's name was still there. She had never deleted it. She selected his name. For several seconds she just stared at the empty message field, her thoughts drifting through every choice that brought her to this moment. Their brief but powerful love, the unexpected pregnancy, her decision to raise Ariella alone, the distance that kept them from ever crossing paths again. She wondered whether he ever thought of her, whether he ever wondered what became of her life, whether he had changed since the day they separated. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was Ariella, her future, her well-being, her right to know where she came from, and what mattered even more was Brant's right to know he had a daughter. Her fingers finally moved. She typed slowly, making sure not to let emotion distort the message. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent." She stared at the words for a long moment, breathing through the tightness in her chest. This message wasn't an invitation. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a doorway to their past. It was necessity. It was motherhood. It was her last chance to secure her child's world before her own time ran out. With a steady exhale, she pressed send. The message left her phone instantly, flying into a world she didn't control, not anymore. The light turned green. Elindra set the phone down, placed both hands on the wheel, and drove toward her daughter. Whatever Brant said next would change everything. The drive to Ariella's school passed in a blur. Not because Elindra wasn't paying attention, she was more aware than ever of every turn, every stop, every familiar building, but because her mind kept drifting backward, pulled toward memories she had locked away for 8 years. Brant, the man whose name she had forced herself not to say out loud, the man who hadn't yet responded to her message. She inhaled slowly, letting the present settle around her. The afternoon sun, the sight of children running on the school's playground, the distant laughter that felt like a promise that life still held joy somewhere. But memory tugged at her, soft but persistent. She remembered the first time she saw him. Charlotte had been buzzing with its usual energy, the kind that mixed the rhythm of black neighborhoods with the polished confidence of the city's white corporate circles. It was a place where different worlds coexisted, sometimes touching, sometimes drifting apart, always shaping those who lived within them. Elindra had been volunteering at a community health fair that summer, offering free screenings and answering questions from families who stopped by her booth. She loved events like that, people from every walk of life showing up in their Sunday best shorts, their natural curls, their loud laughter, their shared sense of belonging. Her black community was woven with church events, cookouts, music that vibrated through open windows, and aunties who believed no one should leave a gathering without a plate of food. That day, she had been wearing a bright teal top and her name badge from the hospital. She remembered feeling productive, energized, at peace. Then he appeared. Brant had stood out immediately, not just because he was white, not just because he looked like he had stepped out of a sharply edited magazine spread, but because he seemed genuinely interested in the fair itself. His business suit didn't quite match the relaxed, bustling environment, yet somehow he didn't look out of place. He carried himself like someone accustomed to structure, expectations, meetings that ran late, decisions that influenced thousands of people. But it was his curiosity, real, unforced, that struck her. He had approached her booth with a smile that hinted at confidence but softened with warmth when he spoke. "You're the most focused person here," he had said lightly, hands in his pockets. "Everyone else is distracted by the food trucks." She remembered glancing up, amused, despite herself. "It's hard to beat good food," she replied. "But health comes first." "Maybe," he said. "But I think people come here because of you. You make them feel safe." It wasn't a flirtatious comment, not exactly. It was an observation, quiet, thoughtful, sincere. And it disarmed her. They talked for almost an hour, about their work, their families, their very different social worlds. He shared pieces of his life in uptown Charlotte, where corporate dinners and charity galas were part of the weekly rhythm. She shared stories of neighborhood festivals, barbershop debates, and the unspoken rule that everyone looked out for each other. It shouldn't have worked. They came from spaces that rarely overlapped. He belonged to a world polished by influence. She belonged to a community strengthened by resilience and connection. Yet something between them felt easy, natural, like the beginning of something neither of them expected. He had asked if she wanted to get coffee sometime. She said yes before she questioned it. Their early romance was gentle, textured by deep conversations, late-night drives, cultural exchanges neither had experienced before, and a connection that felt both fresh and impossible to ignore. He learned to navigate her world. She learned to understand his. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Until it wasn't. Life moved them in different directions. Expectations from his side, responsibilities on hers. A divide neither could bridge in time. When they separated, she was already carrying a secret she couldn't bring herself to share. Ariella. A car horn snapped her back to now. She blinked, realizing she had stopped in front of the school but hadn't stepped out yet. Her daughter was inside, waiting, unaware of how much the world had shifted in just a few hours. Elindra left the car and walked toward the entrance. Ariella's face lit up the moment she saw her, the kind of innocent joy that made everything inside Elindra tremble. "Mommy," the little girl exclaimed, rushing forward with her backpack bouncing behind her. Elindra crouched down and hugged her, breathing in the scent of her daughter's hair, the warmth of her small arms. For a moment, she let herself stay there, soaking in a peace she wished she could live in forever. "Sorry I'm late," she murmured into Ariella's curls. "It's okay," Ariella said cheerfully. "Did you bring my lunchbox?" Elindra smiled softly and held it up. Ariella giggled. They walked to the car together, hand in hand. When they sat inside, Elindra's phone buzzed. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. She turned the screen over. A message from Brant. 2 short sentences. Name a time and place. Her breath tightened. This was real. This was happening. The door she had kept closed for 8 years was now open, and there was no turning back. She glanced at Ariella in the rear seat, humming to herself as she played with the zipper on her backpack. Elindra whispered to herself, "For you, baby. Every step is for you." She typed a reply. Tomorrow, a public place, neutral ground, A coffee shop. The past was returning, not gently, not gradually, but with the force of something unfinished demanding to be faced. And she would face it, for the sake of the little girl she loved more than her own life. The next morning felt heavier than any morning before it, not because of pain, not because of fear, but because today was the day she would confront the past she had avoided for 8 long years. Alindra stood in front of the coffee shop's glass doors, her hand resting lightly on the handle. The bustling sounds inside leaked through the cracks, machines steaming, cups clinking, the low hum of conversations blending together like background noise she couldn't quite drown out. Ariella was safely at school. Her lunch was packed. Her kiss lingered on Alindra's cheek. Now came the part she had been dreading. She pushed the door open. Warm air brushed her face as she stepped inside. The place smelled of roasted beans and pastries fresh out of the oven. It looked the same as she remembered: wooden tables, soft lighting, and windows overlooking the Charlotte streets. Except today, she wasn't here for comfort. She was here for truth. She spotted him before he saw her. Brant sat near the window, back straight, fingers laced on the table. He wore a simple dark shirt and jacket, nothing flashy, nothing overly formal, yet something about him still carried the quiet confidence she once knew well. His hair was slightly longer now, his expression more serious, softened only by a hint of something familiar. She took a breath and approached. When he lifted his head, his eyes locked onto hers. Time didn't stop, but it shifted, like a door swinging open in her memory. "Alindra," he said quietly. His voice hadn't changed. Calm, steady, laced with something that felt like recognition and something else she couldn't name. She nodded, pulling out the chair opposite him. "Thank you for coming," she said, settling into the seat. "I wasn't going to ignore your message," he replied. "You said it was urgent." She looked down at her hands, folded carefully in her lap, trying to gather her thoughts. It had been years of silence, years of distance, years of raising a child alone. Sitting across from him felt unreal, almost like stepping into a story she left unfinished. "You look different," he said softly. "More tired. Are you all right?" Her eyes lifted to meet his. There were 1,000 ways to answer that question, and none of them were simple. "I'm here because we need to talk," she said, "and because I should have spoken to you a long time ago." His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in concern. "Is someone hurt? Did something happen?" "Yes," she replied gently. "A lot happened." Their silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything they never said, everything they lost, everything they walked away from. Brant leaned forward slightly, his expression tense but controlled. "I know things ended badly," he said quietly. "And I know we didn't leave each other on good terms, but I've thought many times about reaching out. I just didn't know if it was welcomed." "It wasn't," she said truthfully. "Back then, I needed space. I wasn't in a place to handle everything happening in your life and mine." He nodded slowly, accepting the truth even if it stung. "I cared about you," he admitted, "more than I ever said. And losing you, losing what we had, never made sense to me." "I cared about you too," she replied, her voice steady. "But my world was changing faster than I could explain. I had responsibilities you didn't understand, and I didn't want to drag you into chaos." His eyebrows drew together. "You think I would have seen it that way?" "At the time, yes." He exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "That hurt to hear. But I can understand why you thought it." Alindra's fingers curled slightly around the edge of the table. Her heart pounded with a rhythm she tried to calm. She had rehearsed this moment all night, the words, the pause, the breath before the confession. But even with all that preparation, speaking the truth felt like stepping off a ledge without knowing the fall. She lifted her eyes. "Brant, there's something I never told you." He straightened, alert. "You're not just someone from my past," she said quietly. "You're connected to my present. Deeply." He watched her, confusion creeping into his expression. 8 years ago," she continued, "our relationship ended, and I walked away. But I didn't walk away alone." His breath hitched. "You mean—" "Yes," she whispered. "You have a daughter." The words settled between them, soft but powerful, like a truth that had waited too long to be spoken. Brant's eyes widened. His hand tightened around the edge of the table. For a moment, he didn't breathe. "A daughter?" he repeated, voice barely above a whisper. "We have a child?" "Yes," His throat worked hard as he swallowed. "What's her name?" he asked, voice breaking. "How old is she? Where is she? Why didn't you tell me? Why?" "So many questions," she said softly. "And you deserve every answer. You do, but you need to know. I wasn't keeping her from you out of spite. I was trying to protect her. And myself." He ran a hand through his hair, emotion flooding his face, shock, grief, confusion, disbelief, and something deeper. Awe. 8 years, he murmured. "All this time, I had a daughter out there." "You do," she replied gently. "She's bright, curious, full of life. She's everything I ever hoped she would be." His eyes glistened. "Can I meet her?" he asked, voice trembling. Her breath wavered. "There's more," she said softly. His expression froze. Fear flickered across his features. "What more?" he whispered. She steadied herself with one deep inhale. Then she said the words that closed the distance between past and present. "I have 90 days left." Brant's face drained of color. He stared at her as though the world shifted beneath his feet. "What?" he breathed. "Alindra, what are you saying?" "The doctor confirmed it yesterday." He shook his head slowly, disbelief aching through his expression. No, you can't drop this on me. Alindra, I just found out I have a daughter. I can't lose you before I even understand any of this." His voice cracked. She reached across the table, her fingertips brushing his knuckles. "I'm not asking you to save me," she said gently. "I just need to know she won't be alone." Brant closed his eyes, fighting the sting behind them. When he opened them again, something unshakable settled in his gaze. "You're not doing this alone," he said. "And I'm not leaving. Not now. Not ever." Morning sunlight settled softly across Freedom Park, giving the water a gentle shimmer as families wandered along the pathways. Children laughed near the playground. Joggers followed the curved trails, and the distant hum of Charlotte life blended into a calm backdrop. Alindra stood beneath a cluster of tall trees, her fingers lightly holding Ariella's hand. The park had always been a safe place for them, open, warm, filled with life. Today it felt different. Today she was introducing her daughter to the man who had unknowingly shaped her world. Ariella swung their interlocked hands playfully. "Mommy, who are we meeting?" Her voice was bright, curious, completely unaware of the moment awaiting her. Alindra smiled down at her. "Someone important, baby." Ariella nodded, accepting that answer the way only children could, without suspicion, without dread, without imagining the weight behind the words. Then she saw him. Brant stood a short distance away, close to the lake, hands tucked in his pockets as he scanned the park. His posture was steady, but there was tension in the way he shifted his weight, as if he didn't know where to place his nerves. This wasn't the confident man commanding boardrooms. This was someone about to meet his child for the first time. He saw them, and his breath visibly caught. Ariella's curls bounced as she walked, and her tiny sneakers scuffed the pavement rhythmically. Brant's eyes followed her every step, not in curiosity, but in recognition, something deep, instinctive, almost primal. A piece of him was walking toward him. Alindra swallowed past the tightness in her chest. "Be gentle," she whispered to herself more than anyone else. They stopped in front of him. Brant crouched slowly, lowering himself to be at Ariella's eye level. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with awe. He said softly, I'm Brant." Ariella blinked, her brown eyes wide and open. "Hi, Brant," she answered, sounding out his name carefully. Her innocence pierced him. Alindra watched the moment Brant's heart opened, fully, completely, without restraint. "How old are you?" he asked gently. 6. Ariella lifted her hand proudly, showing all 5 fingers and then one more for emphasis. Brant's lips curved into a quiet smile. 6 is a great age. Ariella grinned, delighted by his approval. Alindra stepped back a little, not to remove herself, but to give them space. Her heart squeezed as she watched the two halves of her life finally collide. Brant glanced up at her for a moment. She nodded once, giving him silent permission to continue. He returned his gaze to their daughter. "Do you like parks?" he asked. Ariella nodded eagerly. "Mommy brings me here to play, and a walk around the water. And sometimes we get ice cream if I'm good." Brant laughed softly. "Do you think you could show me your favorite place here?" Ariella considered him for a moment, evaluating him the way only a child could, purely, simply. Then she reached out and grabbed his hand. "Come on." The moment her small fingers wrapped around his, Alindra nearly lost her breath. Tears pressed at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. She didn't want Ariella to notice. She didn't want Brant to see her crumble. She wanted them to have this moment, free of worry, free of shadows, free of the ticking countdown in her body. Brant let himself be pulled along as Ariella guided him toward the playground. She pointed at the swings, the slide, the climbing ropes. He listened attentively, nodding, asking small questions, learning her world piece by piece. At one point, she hopped onto a swing and kicked her legs out. "Push me." Brant hesitated just a moment, his hands hovering awkwardly behind her back as though he were afraid to get it wrong. Elindra watched him gather courage. He gave a gentle push. Ariella squealed with delight. Higher. Her laughter echoed across the park. Brant pushed again, his movements careful, protective. His expression softened with every swing, with every burst of laughter she gifted him. For the first time, Elindra saw him as something beyond her past. She saw him as a father, not because of their history, not because of biology, but because of the way he looked at their daughter, like she was the most extraordinary person he had ever met. A subtle family shape began forming, nothing declared, nothing forced, but emerging naturally in the space between them. A mother watching with hope she tried to hide. A father discovering a piece of himself he never knew. A child who simply existed in joy. Ariella hopped off the swing and ran back to him, wrapping her arms around his leg with no hesitation at all. Brant froze, startled by the sudden affection. Then he slowly rested his hand on her shoulder, eyes glistening with something raw and new. Elindra turned away for a moment, wiping a tear before it fell. She had imagined this meeting for years, wondering if it would be painful, awkward, or distant. Instead, it was gentle, warm, something like destiny settling into place. Ariella tugged on Brant's arm. "Come see the ducks." He followed her without question. Elindra walked behind them, quietly, letting herself absorb the sight she never thought she would witness, a father and daughter forming a bond she prayed would outlive her. Today, for the first time since hearing her diagnosis, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. Brant had spent years making decisions that shaped companies, markets, and livelihoods, but none of that prepared him for the simple, overwhelming feeling of watching Ariella toss crumbs to ducks along the lake's edge. She giggled every time a duck waddled closer, her excitement bubbling out in tiny jumps. Brant knelt beside her, not caring that his knees pressed into damp grass or that the hem of his jacket brushed the ground. He was in her world now, one built not from power or routine but from innocence and wonder. Ariella extended her hand toward him. "Hold some with me." Her small palm offered crumbs. He took a pinch, his fingers brushing hers lightly. "Like this?" he asked. She nodded, pleased. Together they leaned forward and released the crumbs. Ariella clapped when the ducks gathered closer, and Brant felt something in his chest loosen, something he didn't know had been tight for years. Behind them, Elindra stood a few feet away, watching with a quiet mixture of awe and love. She kept her expression controlled, but her eyes betrayed a swirl of emotion. The scene unfolding before her was one she never dared imagine would feel so right. A father discovering himself, a daughter accepting him instantly. As Ariella moved to throw more crumbs, Brant looked back at Elindra. Their eyes met briefly. She offered a small, almost shy smile, one that held gratitude and ache in equal measure. He returned the smile, soft and humble. Something warm passed between them. Not the forceful rush of old romance, but the quiet recognition of two people standing at the edge of something new, something fragile, something real. Ariella soon ran toward the open field, chasing a butterfly with boundless energy. Her curls bounced in rhythm with her steps, and her laughter carried across the grass like sunlight. Brant stood beside Elindra now, both of them watching her. "She's incredible," he murmured. "She is," Elindra whispered. "She really is." His gaze remained fixed on Ariella, studying every little detail, the way she hopped, the way she tilted her head when she spotted another butterfly, the way her arms swung freely. "She moves like you," he said softly. Elindra's heart tugged. "And she has your determination," she replied. He inhaled, an unsteady breath he tried to disguise. "I didn't know something was missing from my life," he admitted quietly. "Until I saw her." The words hit her deeper than she expected. "Brant, I didn't mean to take this from you," she said, voice gentle. "Back then, everything was complicated. I was scared. I thought I was protecting her." He nodded slowly. "I understand more now than I ever could have back then." They stood side by side, not touching, but close enough for the air between them to warm. Then Ariella turned around and waved. "Come play with me." Her excitement was too sincere to resist. Brant stepped forward automatically, and Alindra followed. Ariella led them toward a shaded hill where families often lounged on weekends. She plopped down on the grass and patted the spot beside her. "Sit." Brant obeyed instantly, lowering himself without hesitation. Alindra laughed softly as she joined them. Ariella began picking tiny flowers from the ground, yellow, white, purple. She handed one to Brant. "This one is for you." He took it carefully, as though she had handed him something priceless. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. She reached for another flower, a little wilted at the edges, and placed it in Alindra's hand. "And this one is for Mommy." They exchanged a look. Not a romantic look, at least not yet, but something warmer. Something that said they were sharing an experience none of them could undo. Ariella arranged her flowers in a circle. "This is our family garden," she announced proudly. "Only for us three." Brant stilled. Alindra's breath faltered. Ariella didn't realize what she had said, not really. She was just playing. But to them, the words carried weight. Brant swallowed hard. "I'd like to be part of that," he said quietly. Ariella tilted her head. "You already are." He looked away, clearing his throat as emotion gathered behind his eyes. Ariella stood abruptly. "Come on, let's roll down the hill." Alindra laughed. "Not in these clothes, sweetheart." But Ariella grabbed her hand anyway. "Just watch me." She lay on the grass, arms tucked in, and rolled down the hill in a crooked line. Brant laughed, a deep, genuine sound Alindra hadn't heard from him in years. Ariella stumbled to her feet and ran back up. Bits of grass stuck to her hair. "Did I do good?" "You did amazing," Brant said, his smile full and bright. Then it happened. Ariella reached up, touching his cheek with her dirt-smudged hand. "Daddy, look!" The world stopped. Completely. Brant froze. Alindra's heart leapt painfully. Ariella didn't even realize she had said it. She was already turning to point at another hill. Brant looked at Alindra, eyes trembling. She called me." "I know," Alindra whispered. He blinked slowly, trying to steady himself. "I never thought I'd hear that word," he said. "Not from anyone." Alindra touched his arm lightly, just for a second. "You earned it today." The contact sent a quiet warmth between them. It wasn't romantic in a bold way. It was soft, cautious, carrying the weight of shared responsibility and something gently rekindling. Brant exhaled, still trying to compose himself. "That meant more than I can explain." "I know," she said softly. They both watched Ariella run ahead, full of joy and life, and suddenly the weight of Alindra's diagnosis stung sharper. But she masked it, focusing on the moment instead of the countdown. As the day stretched on, the trio walked through the park, stopping at food stands and sharing simple treats: lemonade, soft pretzels, a bag of warm kettle corn. Ariella talked non-stop, bouncing between stories of school, the songs she liked, the funny things she noticed about strangers walking by. Brant listened to every word, not halfway, not politely, but with real attention, the way people listen when they've discovered something they never want to miss again. Their worlds blended effortlessly. Her black, cultural warmth, his refined upbringing, Ariella's beautifully unfiltered joy. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel awkward. It felt like something forming by nature. As they walked, Ariella held both their hands, one small palm wrapped around each adult. A picture of a family, forming without announcement. A picture of a future Brant suddenly couldn't imagine losing. At one point, Ariella ran ahead to chase bubbles blown by a nearby vendor. Alindra and Brant stood together, watching her. "She loves you already," Alindra said softly. Brant exhaled. "I love her too," he admitted. "I know it's early, but it feels natural." Their shoulders brushed as the wind shifted. The connection between them was no longer just about the past. It was about the child who had brought them back together, without even trying. And for the first time in years, something tender flickered between them. Not old feelings resurfacing, but new ones taking shape. Evening settled slowly over Freedom Park, tinting the sky with soft streaks of orange and gold. The warmth of the day faded into a gentle breeze that rustled the leaves above them. Families began gathering their belongings, children's voices shifting from energetic laughter to the tired murmurs that signaled bedtime was near. Ariella had finally slowed down. Her earlier bursts of excitement melted into a sweet, sleepy calm as she walked beside Brant, her small hand curled securely around his fingers. Alindra followed a step behind, watching the two of them with a quiet ache she didn't dare show. The sight was beautiful, almost too beautiful, because it represented everything she wished she could stay alive long enough to witness fully. Brant glanced over his shoulder at her. "You okay?" She nodded, just taking it all in. He didn't push for more. He seemed to understand that some emotions didn't need explanations. Ariella tugged at his hand. "Carry me." Brant blinked, startled by the request. "Carry you?" "Yes," she said simply, lifting her arms. He hesitated only a second before bending down and lifting her into his arms. She settled against his shoulder as though she had known him her whole life, her cheek pressing into the fabric of his shirt. Alindra felt her heart twist. Not from pain, at least not the old kind. This was something softer, heavier, filled with longing she kept tucked out of sight. As they walked toward the parking area, Ariella yawned and wrapped her arms around Brant's neck. He held her with surprising ease, adjusting his grip instinctively, like someone who had carried a child many times before. But he hadn't. This was his first experience, his first day as a father, and he was already learning her weight, her rhythm, her comfort. "She's tired," Alindra said gently. "She can sleep as long as she needs," he whispered. Ariella stirred at the sound of his voice. "Daddy?" The word came out soft, half asleep, natural. Brant froze mid-step, his breath caught. His arms tightened around her, not too much, but with the instinctive protectiveness of someone who had just been handed the most important role of his life. Alindra watched the moment unfold with tears she blinked away quickly. She didn't want him to see how deeply it affected her. She wanted to let him have this moment without any shadow, without any reminder of the countdown ticking inside her body. Brant brushed Ariella's hair gently. "I'm right here," he whispered. Ariella didn't respond. She had already slipped back into sleep. When they reached the cars, Brant reluctantly shifted her into Alindra's arms. Ariella sighed, resting her head against her mother's shoulder without waking. Brant's eyes lingered on their daughter, tracing the curve of her cheek, the softness of her expression, the peace she carried without knowing the world was changing around her. "She had a great day," he said softly. "She did," Alindra replied. "You were good with her." He looked at her, genuinely vulnerable. "I didn't know if I would be. I didn't know what to expect, but it felt natural, more natural than I ever imagined." Alindra's voice softened. "You did more than fine. She connected with you immediately." He exhaled a shaky breath. "She's incredible. I don't want this to be a one-time thing. It doesn't have to be." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but loaded with meaning. The kind of silence that marked a turning point. Alindra shifted Ariella slightly and met his eyes. "Brant, I want you to be part of her life," she said quietly. "Not just today, not just this week. As long as you want to be." He inhaled sharply, emotion rising behind his gaze. "I want to be," he said. "More than I can explain." "Then be," she whispered. "She needs you, and she deserves to know you." His expression softened, but another thought flickered across it. Concern, fear, responsibility. "And you?" he asked gently. "Do you want me in your life again?" The question wasn't loaded with romance. It wasn't a plea. It was honest, spoken by a man who didn't want to impose where he wasn't welcome. Alindra hesitated, not because she didn't know the answer, but because the truth carried weight. "Yes," she said finally, voice barely above the breeze. "I do." The simplicity of the words hit him harder than anything else that day. A soft warmth filled the space between them, like a quiet promise forming without anyone forcing it. Not love reborn, not yet, but the beginning of something tender and deeply human. Ariella stirred again in her sleep, and both adults looked at her instinctively. Two protectors, united by the same child. Brant stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Alindra, whatever time you have left, however we move forward from here, please know this." He paused, gathering the depth of what he was about to say. "Tomorrow, I'll be here." It wasn't a casual promise. It wasn't a polite reassurance. It was a vow, simple, solid, unshakable. Alindra felt her breath catch. She wasn't used to people staying. She wasn't used to sharing her burdens. She wasn't used to believing someone would come back after seeing the hardest parts of her life. But Brant wasn't flinching. Not from fatherhood, not from her past, not from her diagnosis. And that alone made her feel something she hadn't touched in months. Hope. Okay, she whispered. Tomorrow. And the day after that, he added gently. And the day after that, for as long as I'm allowed to be here. Her throat tightened. She held Ariella close and nodded slowly. Then we'll see you tomorrow, she said, her voice warm with a vulnerability she no longer tried to hide. He stepped back reluctantly, giving them space, but his eyes never left them as she carried Ariella to the car. Before she opened the door, Alindra looked back one last time. Brant stood exactly where she had left him, watching her with a mixture of determination and tenderness, something that made her heart pulse with unfamiliar comfort. For the first time since hearing she had 90 days left, she felt a future forming, not for herself, but for her daughter, and maybe even for the man standing before her. A new beginning had taken its first breath. Morning light spilled gently into the small kitchen as Alindra set out plates, moving slowly but trying not to show it. Her body felt heavier than usual, her muscles tender from the long day at Freedom Park. She hadn't slept much. Excitement, fear, hope, all tangled together, but she pushed through, wanting the morning to feel normal for Ariella. A soft knock sounded at the door. Her heart caught, not in fear, but in something unexpected and warm. He kept his promise. Ariella darted from the hallway, still in her pajamas. "Mommy, that's Brant." Alindra smiled softly. "Go ahead. Let him in." Ariella hurried to the door and struggled with the lock until it clicked open. Brant stood on the other side holding a small bakery box and a warm smile that reached his eyes. "Good morning," he said. "Hi," Ariella chirped. "Are those for us?" "If your mom says it's okay," he replied, handing the box to Alindra with a shy confidence that made her chest tighten in a way she didn't expect. "They're fine," she said, lifting the lid to reveal fresh pastries. "They look good." Brant stepped inside, scanning the kitchen the way someone does when they're trying to understand the heart of a home. It wasn't fancy, small, lived in, warm, but something about it grounded him instantly. Ariella tugged at his hand. "We're making breakfast. You want to help?" His smile widened. "Absolutely." Within minutes, he was beside Alindra at the counter, gently elbow deep in pancake batter. Ariella stood on a stool between them, commanding the cooking as though she were the head chef of a grand kitchen. "Stir slow," she instructed Brant. "Mommy says no mess." Brant nodded seriously. "Slow." "Got it." Alindra watched him out of the corner of her eye. He was careful with Ariella, gentle with his hands, patient with her constant commentary, fully focused on her as if nothing else mattered. It struck her unexpectedly. He wasn't just visiting. He was stepping into a life he had never planned for but already seemed to belong to. Halfway through stirring, the spoon slipped, and a splash of batter landed on his shirt. Ariella gasped dramatically. "You made a mess." Brant looked down at the stain. Well, that escalated. Ariella burst into laughter, leaning into him as she giggled. Alindra couldn't hold back her own laughter. The sound filled the kitchen, light and free. She hadn't laughed like that in too long. Brant glanced at her, warmth flickering briefly between them. "You're next," he teased lightly, lifting the spoon. She shook her head quickly. "Don't you dare." Ariella clapped. "Do it." "No," Alindra said, backing up with a smile she couldn't suppress. But Brant's grin grew, mischievous in the most harmless, charming way. He dipped the spoon just slightly and flicked a tiny drop of batter toward her. It landed on her cheek. Ariella squealed. "Mommy, he got you." Alindra wiped her cheek, laughing harder now. Okay, you win." That laughter echoed in the room like a blessing, soft, unexpected, healing. For a moment, they weren't navigating a diagnosis. They weren't managing years of silence. They weren't a fractured history trying to mend itself. They were simply a mother, a father, and a daughter in a warm kitchen filled with flour, batter, and joy. After breakfast, Ariella insisted they all build a fort in the living room. She dragged blankets, pillows, and her favorite stuffed animals across the floor. Brant followed every instruction, never questioning her creativity. "Put that one on top," she said, pointing to a blanket. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. Alindra watched her daughter's growing comfort with him, how she leaned against his side without hesitation, how she asked him to tie her hair ribbon, how she laughed at even his simplest jokes. Ariella was blossoming, and the source of her joy was standing right beside her, trying to balance a pillow tower that was clearly doomed. The tower fell. Ariella collapsed into giggles. Brant dramatically fell with it. Alindra held her ribs from laughing. Ariella turned to him suddenly and wrapped her arms around his neck in a spontaneous hug. "I'm happy you came," she said simply. Brant swallowed. "I'm happy I did too." Alindra had to look away to keep her emotions steady. As they cleaned the fort, Alindra felt a sharp pulse of weakness in her legs. It struck fast, like someone briefly unplugged her strength. She reached for the wall. Brant noticed instantly. "You okay?" he asked softly, stepping beside her. "Just tired," she whispered. "It happens." He didn't crowd her. He didn't panic. He simply offered his arm. She took it because she needed to, not because she wanted him to worry. Ariella didn't notice. She was busy organizing stuffed animals. Brant guided Alindra gently to the couch. "Sit," he murmured. She did. His voice lowered, full of quiet care. "Let me help today. Let me do something." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting gratitude and fear. Fear that he'd see too much. Fear that she'd rely on him. Fear that he'd start counting the days left too. But he didn't look afraid. He looked committed. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." He nodded once, as though her allowing him to help meant everything. Ariella climbed onto the couch between them, placing her small hands on both of theirs. "We're a team now," she declared proudly. Brant smiled at her. "Yes, we are." Alindra's breath shook, but she masked it with a smile. This living room, this warmth, this closeness, felt like the beginning of a family forming quietly, tenderly, without being forced. Brant wasn't just visiting anymore. He was part of their daily life. And as the morning sun lit the room around them, Alindra let herself experience something she hadn't touched in weeks. The comfort of being supported, the joy of not being alone, the warmth of watching love return, not loudly, but quietly, like it had been waiting for the right moment. The afternoon sun drifted lazily through the living room windows, filling the space with a soft warmth. Ariella had fallen asleep in the fort they'd made earlier, curled among pillows, a blanket tucked under her chin, one hand still resting on her favorite stuffed animal. Brant pulled the blanket higher around her and stepped back slowly, careful not to wake her. Alindra watched him from the couch. The exhaustion from earlier still lingered, but sitting there, seeing him like this, brought a quiet calm over her. Brant turned toward her. "She's really out," he whispered. "She always is after a good day," Alindra said, smiling faintly. "A good day," he repeated, as though trying to fold the words into himself. "It's been a long time since I've had one of those." The confession sat between them, gentle, raw, honest. Alindra motioned toward the hallway. "Can you grab the photo box from the top shelf? The gray one." Brant nodded and headed down the hallway. She listened to his footsteps, steady and sure, blending into the comfortable stillness of the apartment. When he returned, he held the box carefully, almost reverently. "This one?" he asked. "Yes." He sat beside her and placed it between them. The lid came off easily, releasing a faint scent of old memories, paper, perfume that had long faded, and seasons of life she hadn't revisited in years. Brant glanced inside. "You kept all of this?" "Of course," she said softly. "These were the pieces of my life before I became a mother." He reached for a picture near the top. It was a photo of them from years ago, standing in front of a mural in Charlotte, laughing at something just outside the frame. He stared at it for a long moment. "I remember this day," he murmured. "So do I," she whispered. He brushed a thumb across the glossy surface. "We were happy." "Yes," she said. "We were." Brant sifted slowly through the photos, each one a doorway to a memory they'd once shared, a picture of them at a small jazz spot, both leaning close to hear the music. A selfie on a rooftop, where he had tried to impress her, but nearly lost his balance. A blurry shot of them baking together, covered in flour long before Ariella ever flicked batter on anyone. He smiled at that one. "I forgot how much of a mess I used to make in the kitchen." "You haven't changed," she teased lightly. "And you still try to pretend you're not amused." She laughed softly, a sound he seemed to treasure, given the way his expression warmed. He held up another photo, Alindra in scrubs, hair pulled back, her smile bright and confident. "You look unstoppable here," he said. "I felt like I was," she replied. "Back then, I thought I had endless time to do everything." Brant lowered the photo, his gaze shifting to her slowly, carefully. "You still look unstoppable," he said, voice gentle. She didn't look away. For the first time in years, she let herself meet his gaze without hiding the grief behind it. "I'm not that woman anymore," she whispered. Her voice didn't crack. It simply told the truth. Maybe not, he said. But the woman you are now, she's stronger than the one in the photo. Her breath trembled, not in pain, but in realization. It had been so long since anyone saw strength in her. Brant set the photos aside and turned toward her fully. I need to say something, he began quietly. Something I should have said before everything fell apart. She waited. I wasn't ready back then, he admitted. For commitment, for responsibility, for the depth of what we had. I thought I could manage it, but your world felt so different from mine, and I didn't know how to bridge that gap. Alindra nodded slowly. I know. I felt that too, but I cared for you more than I could articulate, he continued. And when you left, I thought giving you space was the right thing. Eventually, that space became something else, something I never knew how to undo. She folded her hands in her lap. We were young, she said softly, trying to fit two different lives together without understanding what that really meant. I loved you, he said, not forcefully, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of a man finally speaking a truth he had carried too long. Her breath stilled. He didn't try to touch her. He didn't lean closer. He simply let the words exist between them. And I know this isn't the time for grand confessions, he said shakily. I know your focus is on Ari. It should be. But I want you to understand. I never stopped caring. A silence settled, thick but tender. Finally, Alindra spoke. I loved you too, she said, her voice quieter than the whisper of the air conditioner. And it scared me, because I wasn't sure if love was enough to carry us through the differences in our worlds. He nodded. It wasn't then. But now, maybe it can be something softer, something real, something honest. She looked down at her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from illness, but from emotion she had guarded for years. Brant, my life isn't going forward the way it should, she said, choosing each word carefully. I'm fading, and I don't want you to feel obligated to rebuild something with someone who won't be here long. His jaw tightened. Don't say it like that. It's the truth, she said gently. It's not an expiration on what we feel, he replied. Feelings aren't tied to time. They happen because of connection, not guarantees. Her eyes stung, but she didn't look away. Brant shifted closer, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. I'm not asking for anything from you, he said. Not love, not a relationship, not promises. I just want to be present. For Ariella, and for you, if you'll let me. Her chin quivered despite her best efforts. You're already doing more than I ever expected, she whispered. And I'll keep doing it, he said. Not because of the past, but because of now. She exhaled slowly, a breath full of ache and gratitude. Brant's hand hovered above hers for a moment, hesitant, respectful, then gently settled atop it when she didn't pull away. The contact was simple, not romantic in a bold sense, but meaningful. A connection rebuilding itself with patience and truth. You were my first real love, she admitted quietly, and losing you hurt in ways I never talked about. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm not, she said, because we created something beautiful from it, Ariella, he said softly. Yes. They both looked toward the living room fort where their daughter slept peacefully. A gentle silence embraced them. Not the awkward kind. Not the unresolved kind. The kind where two people recognized that something important was being rebuilt. Not fast, not forced, but naturally, the way hearts sometimes heal when given permission. I want to say something too, Alindra murmured. Brant straightened slightly, attentive. I was afraid to tell you about Ariella, she said. Not because I doubted you, but because I doubted myself. I didn't think I could handle the possibility of being rejected when I was already feeling so overwhelmed. You wouldn't have been rejected, he said firmly. I know that now, she whispered. Watching you with her today, I know. A tear slipped down her cheek. Brant brushed it gently with his thumb. A brief, tender gesture. Their eyes held. Neither tried to force a declaration. Neither rushed into promises. But the truth hung openly between them. They had once loved each other deeply. And that love, quiet, wounded, but alive, was finding its way back. Slow, soft, real. Night settled slowly over the apartment, wrapping the rooms in a gentle dimness. Ariella was tucked into bed, drifting into the kind of deep sleep only children seemed capable of, unburdened, peaceful, wrapped in soft blankets and the quiet reassurance that she was loved. Brant stood beside her bed, smoothing a stray curl off her forehead. He didn't rush. He didn't treat it like a casual moment. Instead, he lingered, studying every tiny detail of her face as though memorizing her mattered more than anything else. Ariella stirred gently, her sleepy voice muffled by her pillow. "Good night, Daddy." Brant swallowed hard. The words still hit him in a place words rarely reached. "Good night, sweetheart," he whispered. He leaned down and kissed her cheek, hesitant at first, then with a tenderness that surprised even him. Alindra watched from the doorway. Her hand rested lightly on the frame, her body tired, but her heart fuller than it had been in months. When Brant stepped out of the room and quietly closed the door, she exhaled the breath she'd been holding. "She loves you," she said softly. He nodded, emotion tightening his voice. "I love her too. I didn't expect it to hit so fast. That's how she is." Alindra smiled. "She opens doors without warning." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she could see the weight of the day settling on him. Not tiredness, something deeper. Responsibility, purpose, devotion, a new steadiness. Something she needed more than she dared admit. They moved into the living room, where a folder lay on the coffee table. Alindra had placed it there hours earlier, preparing herself for the conversation she could no longer avoid. Brant noticed it immediately. "What's that?" he asked gently. She sat down and opened the folder, revealing neatly arranged documents. "I spoke with my doctor," she said, "and he told me it's time to start making arrangements for Ariella's future." His entire expression changed, shoulders tightening, jaw clenching, the spark of fear clouding his eyes. "Alindra," she raised a hand softly. "Let me finish." He quieted. She took a slow breath, grounding herself. "I need to designate a guardian for her, someone who will love her, protect her, raise her with the same care I've tried to give her." Brant stared at her, stunned. "You mean me?" "Yes," she whispered. "I mean you." Emotion flickered across his face, shock, honor, disbelief, and a deep ache she wasn't expecting. "You're trusting me with her life," he murmured. "I'm trusting you with her heart," she corrected gently. "You're her father, and you've shown me, in just a few days, that you're willing to step into her world, not out of obligation, but out of love." He sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Alindra, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," she replied softly. "Just be here for her. That's all she needs." He reached for the papers slowly, reading the first page, his name beside the word guardian. "You already filled everything out," he said quietly. "Yes. I just need to sign." She handed him a pen, but kept her gaze steady. "I wanted you to see it first." Brant looked at her, really looked, and she saw tears gathering in his eyes. "I'll take care of her," he whispered. "No matter what, I'll make sure she grows up loved, supported, safe." "I know," she said. "And I'm not going anywhere," he added firmly. "Not today, not tomorrow, not after whatever happens." His voice cracked. She held his gaze without flinching. "Thank you." With a steady hand, she signed the papers. Brant exhaled, a rough sound, half relief, half heartbreak. "Ariella will never walk alone," he vowed. "Not while I'm alive." The promise hung in the room like a blessing. The next morning the world felt lighter in a way Alindra didn't expect. The air was crisp, the sky clear, and Ariella was practically buzzing with excitement in the back seat as they drove toward Wilmington. "Beach, beach, beach," she chanted, kicking her feet. Brant laughed softly. "She's ready." "She loves the ocean," Alindra said, glancing out the window as trees blurred past. It always made her feel free. "Let's make today perfect for her," he replied. The drive was peaceful. Ariella sang quietly to herself, watching the scenery fly by. Brant kept glancing at Alindra, checking on her without being obvious. And she let him. When they reached Wilmington, Ariella sprinted straight toward the shoreline, squealing as the waves chased her feet. Brant followed closely, pretending the water was too cold, making her shriek with laughter. Alindra walked behind them, her hands in her pockets, her steps unhurried. She didn't have the strength to run with them, but she had enough to savor the sight of them together, Brant lifting Ariella over a wave, both of them laughing as the water splashed around them. They found a quiet spot where the sand was warm and untouched. Ariella built a crooked sandcastle while Brant gathered shells for decoration. The simple joy of it, Felt like a scene from a life she wished she had more time to live. At one point, Ariella ran off to chase seagulls, leaving Brant and Alindra sitting close enough that their shoulders touched lightly. "She's happy," he said. "She is," Alindra agreed. "She always is by the water." He looked at her, his gaze softening. "You're pale," he murmured. "I'm okay," she said with a small smile. "The ocean always helps." He didn't push. Instead, he took her hand, slowly, respectfully, as though asking permission with his touch. She didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined naturally, the warmth of his hand steadying her. Ariella came running back and plopped down between them, placing a shell in each of their palms. "These match," she announced proudly. "Just like us." Brant smiled. "So we're a set." "A special set," she corrected firmly. "Like a family set." Alindra's breath caught. Brant's eyes glistened. "Yeah," he whispered. "A family set." Ariella grinned wide and leaned against both of them, her tiny body bridging the two people who once loved each other and were slowly finding their way back, not through force, but through small moments like this. Soft, warm, real. The three of them sat there, the waves humming gently beside them, the shells glinting in their hands, the future unfolding quietly in front of them. For the first time, it felt like tomorrow wasn't something they were bracing for. It was something they were building. Together. The days after their Wilmington trip slipped by softly, each one carrying a mix of sweetness and ache. For a little while, the family they had formed, quietly, gently, moved through life as though time had loosened its grip. Ariella's laughter filled the apartment, Brant's steady presence grounded every moment, and Alindra held on to each second with silent gratitude. But the decline came anyway. It started with small things. A stumble while walking from the bedroom to the kitchen, a breath that caught a little too long. A heaviness in her limbs she could no longer push through. One morning, Alindra tried to stand and felt her legs fail beneath her. Brant caught her before she hit the floor. After that, the bed became her world. He moved through the apartment quietly, but there was a heaviness in him, a silent struggle he tried to keep from showing. Brant stayed by her side as much as possible, adjusting pillows, bringing water, gently brushing sweat from her forehead when fever spells came and went. He spoke calmly. He smiled for her sake. He kept his voice steady. But in the dim corners of the room, when she closed her eyes, he let himself break in small private ways. He would lean his forehead against the wall and breathe carefully, as though holding back a storm he refused to let her see. He didn't want his anguish to become her burden, yet she could feel it. Even with her strength fading, she could read the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands sometimes trembled when he adjusted her blanket, the way he sat up through the night just to make sure she was still breathing. Once, when he thought she was asleep, he whispered, "You're not alone. Not for 1 second. I'm here." She didn't open her eyes, but she felt the truth in it. Ariella tried to understand. She tried with the innocence of a child who loved deeply and didn't know how to fear anything until now. She would sit beside her mother's bed, small fingers tracing patterns on the sheets. "Mommy, why are you tired so much?" Alindra would smile softly, brushing her daughter's cheek. "Mommy's just resting, sweetheart." But rest didn't look like this. Rest didn't make a mother too weak to walk. Rest didn't dim a mother's voice or slow her breathing. Ariella didn't cry at first. She watched quietly, unsure how to process what she was seeing. But one afternoon, she climbed into the bed, curled against Alindra's side, and whispered, "Are you getting better?" Alindra kissed her forehead. "I'm right here with you." It wasn't an answer, but it was the truth she could offer. A few minutes later, Ariella's small body shook with silent sobs, her face buried in her mother's shoulder. Brant rushed over, lifting her gently and holding her close. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe." But she clung to him, trembling, and he felt her fear seep into him like cold water. News traveled quietly among those who loved Alindra, neighbors, co-workers, church members, the people who had seen her grow, sacrifice, give, and care for others. One by one, they came to the door with meals, soft blankets, prayers, and gentle words. They didn't overwhelm her. They didn't crowd the apartment. They simply offered presence. A woman from her church left flowers on the counter. An old co-worker brought soup and whispered, "We're praying for you, sweetheart." Brant thanked each person, standing in the doorway with Ariella beside him. The kindness softened her confusion, showing her that love didn't disappear when things became hard. One evening, the living room filled with warm faces and quiet voices. People sat together, some on chairs, some on the floor, sharing memories of Alindra's kindness. Laughter mixed with tears, forming a circle of comfort around her. From the bedroom, she could hear everything. She couldn't join them physically, but the sound wrapped her like a quilt. Brant leaned into the doorway, watching her listen with a tired but grateful smile. "They love you," he murmured. She nodded faintly. "I love them too." When the knock came the next morning, Brant knew who it was before he opened the door. Alindra's mother stepped inside with a quiet, powerful presence. Grief shadowed her eyes, but strength held her shoulders upright. She went straight to her daughter's bedside, taking her hand with a tenderness that needed no words. "My baby," she whispered, stroking her cheek. "I'm here now." Ariella ran to her grandmother, hugging her tightly. "Grandma, Mommy's really tired." "I know, love," she said softly. Brant stepped back, giving them space, but Alindra's mother turned toward him. Her gaze studied him, not harshly but deeply. "You've been taking care of them," she said. "Yes," he answered quietly. She nodded once, the tension in her expression softening. "Thank you," she said. "You stepped in when it mattered." Brant swallowed. "I'm not leaving them." Her eyes shone with understanding and something like approval. She reached out and placed a hand gently on his arm. "My daughter trusted you," she said, "and I do too." Those words carried a blessing deeper than anything ceremonial. A recognition, a passing of responsibility, a quiet acknowledgement that he belonged here, not as a visitor, but as family. Brant bowed his head, emotion tightening his throat. "Thank you," he whispered. That evening, as everyone settled into the apartment, Alindra rested peacefully. Her breathing was slow but steady. Her hand curled around the blanket, still warm from Ariella's presence earlier. Brant sat beside her, eyes studying every detail, committing her face, her voice, her presence to memory without letting fear take over. He held her hand gently. She didn't speak, but she squeezed his fingers. A silent message, "I'm still here," and he squeezed back. "You're not facing this alone." Outside, the last bit of daylight faded into the sky, and the apartment grew quiet, filled with love, pain, hope, and a family holding on to every moment left. The night passed quietly, as though the world itself sensed the fragility in the apartment. Soft breaths came from down the hall, where Ariella slept curled against her grandmother, and faint. City sounds drifted through the windows, car tires humming, a distant siren, the whisper of wind against the glass. Brant stayed beside Alindra through it all. He didn't sleep. He didn't close his eyes. He couldn't. Every rise and fall of her chest felt like a countdown he wasn't ready for, and yet knew he had to face. Near dawn, the first hint of sunrise began to glow faintly at the edge of the curtains, soft gold brushing the room with gentle light. Alindra stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, focusing first on the ceiling, then shifting toward Brant. She gave him a small, tired smile, one that held both recognition and acceptance. "You stayed," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere," he murmured. She nodded faintly, her voice barely above air. "I know." He reached for her hand, careful not to jostle her. It felt lighter than ever, delicate in a way that broke him quietly inside. A moment passed where neither spoke. The only sound was the soft rhythm of her breathing. The sunrise grew brighter, stretching warm color across her sheets. Ariella's grandmother stepped into the doorway, signaling silently that Ariella had woken up. Brant nodded gently and stepped aside as the older woman guided the young girl toward the bed. Ariella rubbed her eyes, still half asleep. "Mommy," she whispered. Alindra smiled gently. "Hi, baby." Ariella climbed onto the bed carefully, settling beside her mother with the tenderness of a child who understood more than she could explain. Brant stood back, giving them space. He felt the ache rise in his throat again, but he held steady, letting them share the moment that belonged only to them. "Mommy, I drew something for you," Ariella said softly, pulling a folded paper from her pajama pocket. "You did?" Alindra asked, voice faint but warm. I worked hard. Grandma helped me color the sky." She handed the drawing over carefully. Alindra opened it with slow, trembling fingers. On the paper was a picture of the three of them, Alindra, Brant, and Ariella, holding hands beneath a sun that filled the page. The colors were bright, hopeful, full of warmth. "It's beautiful," Alindra whispered, brushing her thumb gently over the crayon strokes. "Just like you." Ariella's chin wobbled slightly. "Mommy, are you going to get better soon?" The room stilled. Elindra looked at her daughter with a softness that held the weight of every dream she ever had. "I'm not getting better, sweetheart," she said gently. "But I'm with you. I'll always be with you." Ariella blinked, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "Always, always," Elindra whispered, touching her cheek. "In your heart, in your smile, in the way you laugh. I'll be part of all of it." Ariella leaned forward and hugged her with her small arms, careful but desperate. Elindra held her close, breathing in the scent of her daughter's hair, wanting to memorize it forever. When Ariella's grandmother gently lifted the child away to give her mother rest, Elindra touched her daughter's cheek one last time. "Listen to Daddy," she whispered softly. "He'll take care of you." Ariella sniffed, nodding. "I love you, Mommy." "I love you more," Elindra whispered. Brant stepped closer, kneeling beside the bed as Ariella was guided to the living room. The morning light grew stronger. It framed Elindra's face, giving her a soft glow that made her look almost untouched by the pain she carried. "I feel clear this morning," she murmured. Brant nodded, brushing her hair gently behind her ear. "You look peaceful." She took a slow breath. "I want to say something to you." He leaned closer, listening with every part of himself. "When I met you, I didn't know the impact you would have on my life," she whispered. "I didn't know you would give me my greatest gift." He swallowed hard. "Ariella." "Yes." She smiled faintly. "And you were a gift too. Even though things didn't last back then, what we had was real. And what we rebuilt was even more real." He felt tears gather, but didn't let them fall. "She deserved steadiness. You changed me," she said softly. "You walked back into our lives without hesitation. You became the father Ari needed, the support I prayed for. I need you to know. I love you." The words were simple, fragile, honest. Brant's breath caught. "I love you too," he whispered, voice broken with emotion. She closed her eyes briefly, just long enough to savor the truth of the moment, then opened them again, focusing on him with calm clarity. "Take care of her," she said. "Give her joy. Give her a life full of warmth and safety." "I will," he vowed. "I swear it. And don't disappear into grief," she added softly. "You still have a future. Let yourself live it." Brant bowed his head, unable to speak for a moment. She squeezed his fingers, weak, but full of meaning. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing up, for staying." Her mother stepped into the room quietly, placing one hand on Elindra's shoulder, the other on Brant's. It was a circle of love, 3 hearts holding on to one another as the light shifted quietly across the floor. Elindra's breathing slowed. Brant held her hand tighter. Her mother held the other. Elindra looked toward the doorway where Ariella watched, small, teary-eyed, but brave. "I love you," she whispered toward her daughter. Ariella stepped forward, placing her hand over her mother's. "I love you too, Mommy." The sunrise reached its peak, the warm light touching all 3 of them. Elindra's breath eased into a gentle rhythm, then slower, then softer. Brant whispered, "We're here. You're not alone." Her fingers curled once inside his palm. Then her chest stilled. She passed peacefully, holding the 2 hands that meant everything in her world. The day of the funeral arrived with a sky that felt too quiet, too still, as though the world itself understood that something irreplaceable had been taken. Soft gray clouds drifted slowly overhead, giving the air a gentle heaviness. People gathered in the small chapel, friends, co-workers, neighbors from her community, members of her church, and those whose lives Elindra had touched without ever realizing how deeply she mattered to them. The room filled with soft whispers, warm embraces, and eyes full of grief. Brant stood near the front, holding Ariella close. She wore a simple black dress, her hair tied with a small ribbon her mother had once placed lovingly in her curls. Her eyes were round with confusion and sadness, as though she wasn't sure how to fit her feelings into the moment unfolding around her. Brant knelt beside her. "Whenever you feel scared," he whispered, "I'm right here." Ariella nodded slowly and clutched his hand tighter. Elindra's mother approached, placing her palm gently on Ariella's back. "You're not alone, baby," she said softly. "We're here with you." Together, the 3 of them formed a quiet circle of support while the ceremony began. The pastor spoke gently, honoring Elindra's life with words soaked in gratitude, her kindness, her compassion, the way she carried her community, the way she raised her daughter with warmth and depth. Stories were shared, Moments of laughter, acts of service, small gestures of love she had scattered across her life, without realizing how much they mattered. Ariella leaned her head on Brant's arm as she listened. At one point she whispered, "I miss Mommy." Brant pulled her close. "I miss her too," he said, "and will honor her every day." When it was time for the final viewing, Ariella hesitated. Brant lifted her gently, holding her securely as her small body trembled. "Mommy looks like she's sleeping," Ariella murmured. "Yes," Brant whispered. "She's resting now." Ariella reached out with a trembling hand and touched her mother's fingers, cold now, still, but familiar. "Good night, Mommy," she whispered. "I love you." Brant's chest tightened painfully. He didn't cry loudly or fall apart, but tears slipped down his face silently, tears he didn't bother wiping away. Ariella's grandmother placed her hand on both of them, forming a connection that steadied the moment. Together, they stepped back. Together, they let her go. After the service, the reception hall filled with people offering condolences. Plates of food appeared on tables, and warm embraces were shared, but grief hung in the air, quiet, respectful, difficult. Ariella stayed close to Brant, clinging to his jacket as though he were the only anchor she had left. "I don't like it here," she whispered at one point. Brant lifted her into his arms. "Then we'll step outside," he said gently. "You don't have to stay where it feels heavy." They walked to a small bench under a tree near the chapel. Leaves rustled softly above them as Ariella curled into him, her face pressed against his chest. "Why did Mommy have to go?" she cried quietly. Brant tightened his hold. "She loved you with everything she had," he said softly. "And love doesn't stop just because she's not here. She'll always be in your heart." "But I can't see her," Ariella said through tears. Brant nodded. "I know, and that hurts. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to miss her. Will you stay with me?" she asked. He didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said. "Forever." Her sobs softened, and she eventually rested against him, exhausted from emotion. Later, when the guests began leaving, Elindra's mother approached Brant with a steadiness that carried both grief and resolve. "You took care of my daughter when her body couldn't fight anymore," she said, "and you took care of my granddaughter when she didn't know how to understand her pain." Brant shook his head slightly. "I only did what anyone would have done." "No," she said firmly. "You did more. And I'm grateful." He swallowed hard, unable to speak. She continued, "Elindra trusted you with everything that mattered, and I trust you too. You're family now, not because of paperwork, but because of the love you've given to both of them." Brant felt a warmth expand in his chest, steady, humbling, grounding. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I promise I won't fail them." She placed her hand on his cheek gently, the same way she used to touch Elindra when she was a child. "You haven't failed," she said. "You've stepped into your place with honor." The apartment felt different when they returned that afternoon. It felt too quiet, too still, missing the heartbeat that once filled every room. Ariella walked in slowly, holding Brant's hand with a grip that told him she didn't want distance, not even for a moment. Her grandmother stayed for support, helping ease the transition, but it became clear within hours that Ariella needed Brant more than anything. "Can you stay here?" she asked timidly, looking up at him with watery eyes. Brant knelt to meet her gaze. "Yes, I'm not leaving you." Her grandmother nodded from the doorway. "She needs stability," she said. "Her home shouldn't feel empty right now." So Brant unpacked a small bag and placed it in Elindra's room, not to take her place, not to erase her presence, but to be near Ariella when she woke in the night feeling lost. He tucked the little girl into her bed that evening. She looked at him with a fragile hope. "Will you be here when I wake up?" He brushed her curls gently. "I'll be right here, sweetheart." She nodded, closing her eyes. Within minutes, she was asleep. Brant stepped into the living room and sat on the couch, letting the quiet surround him. He looked around at the photos on the shelves, the ones he had seen for the first time only days earlier, each one now infused with a deeper weight. He wasn't just looking at Elindra's home anymore. He was looking at his family's home. Ariella's grandmother joined him on the couch. "She'll have hard days," she said softly, "and she'll have days where she laughs again. Both are part of healing." Brant nodded. "I'll be here for all of them." "You're doing right by her," she said, "and Elindra would be proud." He looked toward the bedroom where Ariella slept, then to the room where Elindra once smiled, once cooked, once laughed. "I hope so," he whispered. Her mother placed her hand on his. "You're not replacing Alindra," she said. "You're carrying her love forward. That's what matters now." Brant breathed deeply, letting the truth settle inside him. He wasn't just fulfilling a promise. He was building the life Alindra wanted for her daughter, one filled with care, stability, and a love strong enough to help them heal. And as the night deepened around them, he felt the weight of his vows settle firmly into place. Ariella would never walk alone. Not now, not ever. Morning in the apartment felt different now. Not empty, because Ariella's presence kept every room warm, but quieter, softer, touched with a kind of tenderness Brant hadn't known before this chapter of his life began. He stood in the kitchen preparing breakfast the way he had seen Alindra do countless times: cut fruit, warm oatmeal, a little honey, nothing complicated. He tried to follow her rhythm, not because he had to, but because he wanted Ariella to feel something familiar, something that reminded her of her mother. Ariella padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. Her curls were messy, her steps slow, her face thoughtful the way children look when sleep hasn't fully let them go. "Good morning," Brant said gently. She walked straight into his arms, wrapping her small hands around his waist. He lifted her easily. "Did you sleep okay?" She shrugged against his shoulder. "A little. I dreamed about Mommy." He held her closer, not rushing her, not speaking too soon. "What happened in your dream?" he asked softly. "She told me you'd take good care of me," Ariella whispered. Brant closed his eyes for a moment, breathing carefully. "I'll do everything I can to make her proud." Ariella nodded, trusting him completely. Their mornings slowly took shape. He learned how she liked her toast just barely golden. He learned which of her stuffed animals absolutely had to sit at the table during breakfast. He learned she liked to hum while brushing her hair, soft little melodies she made up herself. After breakfast, he walked her to school. The first few days she held his hand tightly, her steps careful, her head lowered. But gradually she began lifting her chin again, noticing birds, pointing out passing dogs, skipping over cracks in the sidewalk. One morning she said, "Daddy, look, that cloud looks like a fish." He turned his gaze upward and smiled. "Yeah, I see it." It was a small win, but it felt monumental. When she ran into school, turning to wave at him from the door, his chest warmed with a new kind of pride, something beyond success, beyond achievement, beyond any boardroom victory he had ever known. He was learning to be a father, step by step, day by day, and he was determined to get it right. But grief wasn't linear. It didn't soften just because time moved forward. Some afternoons, Ariella came home quiet. Some nights, she wouldn't eat. Sometimes she would crawl into Brant's lap and cry without clear reason. Once, she clutched her favorite stuffed bunny and said, "I don't want Mommy to forget me." Brant knelt, holding her hands. "She could never forget you," he whispered. "Not in this life, not in any life." "Do you think she still sees us?" Ariella asked. He brushed a curl from her forehead. "In every moment we love each other, she's here." Ariella leaned into him again. He felt her shaking slowly, heartbreak working through her small body. And he did the only thing he could, hold her through the storm until she relaxed against him, trusting him to guide her forward. Later that night, after putting her to sleep, Brant finally let his own tears fall into the dim light of the living room. Not loudly, just enough to release the ache. He whispered to the quiet room, "I'm trying, Alindra. I hope you can see that." And somehow, he believed she could. A week later, while drawing at the table, Ariella looked up suddenly. "Daddy, can you tell me a story about Mommy?" Brant paused, surprised and honored. "What kind of story do you want?" he asked. "One where she's happy," Ariella said. So he told her about the time Alindra tried to teach him how to dance in the living room and he nearly tripped over the rug. Ariella laughed, picturing it perfectly. "Mommy was a better dancer than you," she announced. "I know," he smiled. He told her about the community health fair where he first met her mother, how he ruined his suit by trying to help carry supplies, and how Alindra teased him about it for weeks. He told her about the way she smiled when she held Ariella as a newborn, how her entire world seemed to glow. Ariella listened with wide eyes, absorbing every detail. "Tell me another," she said. So he did. And another, and another. It became their new bedtime ritual, stories of the woman who shaped their hearts, stories that kept her present, stories that allowed Ariella to feel connected to her mother in a way grief could never erase. Slowly, the apartment shifted from a place of loss into a place of living. Brant learned how to tie ribbons in Ariella's hair. He learned which bedtime songs helped her sleep and which made her laugh too hard. He learned which nights she needed to sleep curled up against him because the world felt too heavy. He kept the routines steady. He adjusted meetings to pick her up on time. He cooked simple meals, sometimes burning the edges, but always trying again. He decorated her lunchbox with little notes she treasured. The rhythms of their new life didn't replace the old one. Nothing could. But they created something stable, something warm, something built from love that didn't end when Alindra's heartbeat faded. One night, after reading her a story, Ariella looked up and said, "You're doing good, Daddy." Brant felt a warmth behind his eyes, but he held back the tears. "Thank you, sweetheart," he whispered. "I'm learning." She curled against him, and in that moment, he knew. He wasn't filling Alindra's shoes. He was building a new path beside the one she left, a path carved from the legacy of her love. The house felt different in the weeks that followed, not lighter, not heavier, just changed. Grief softened into something quieter, something that lived in the corners of the apartment rather than consuming every room. Routines grew steadier, mornings became more familiar, and Ariella started humming again while brushing her hair. Life didn't move on, but it moved forward. One Saturday morning, while searching through the hallway closet for a box of old photos to show Ariella, Brant noticed something tucked behind a stack of folded blankets, a small wooden container with delicate carvings on the lid. He didn't remember ever seeing it before. He lifted it carefully and brought it to the living room. Ariella looked up from her coloring. "What's that?" "I'm not sure," Brant said softly. "Let's open it together." They sat on the couch and he gently lifted the lid. Inside were journals, 4 of them, each one neatly tied with ribbon, each one worn at the edges from frequent handling. On top lay an envelope with a simple note written in Alindra's handwriting, "For when the time is right." Ariella touched the envelope softly. "Is it from Mommy?" "Yes," Brant said, his voice warm but steady. "It is." He didn't open the envelope yet. Instead, he picked up the first journal and ran his fingers along the pages. "These are her thoughts," he murmured. "Her hopes, her heart." Ariella leaned closer, curiosity lighting her eyes. "Can you read some?" Brant didn't hesitate. "Of course." He opened the journal to a random page, and Alindra's handwriting greeted them, strong, graceful, full of emotion. The entry began with a simple line. "Ariella laughed today, really laughed, and it reminded me how much light one little girl can hold." Ariella smiled softly, hiding her face shyly behind her hands. "She wrote about me?" she whispered. "She wrote about you all the time," Brant replied. "You were her whole world." He read another line. "Sometimes I worry about raising her alone. But then she smiles, and every fear I have falls quiet." Ariella rested her head on his arm, absorbing the words slowly. "Mommy wasn't scared when I was born." "No," Brant whispered. "She was brave. She loved you so much, it made her strong." He flipped another page. "If anything ever happens to me, I pray someone will love her with the same devotion I feel. I pray she will never feel abandoned. I pray someone will show up for her the way her smile deserves." Ariella looked at him gently. "Mommy was talking about you." Brant swallowed hard. Maybe she hoped someone would come. "And I'm here now." Ariella wrapped her arms around him, and he held her close. At the bottom of the box were several sealed letters, each labeled with a different milestone. "For your 6th birthday. For your first day of school. For when you lose your first tooth. For when you feel lonely. For when you fall in love." Ariella's small fingers grazed each envelope with reverence. "She wrote all of these for me?" "Yes," Brant said. His voice cracked slightly, but he kept it steady. "She wanted to make sure you always felt her love." Ariella held the letter labeled for "When you feel lonely." "Can we open this one today?" she asked timidly. Brant hesitated, only to honor the weight of the moment. Then he nodded. "Today is the right day." He opened it carefully and began to read. "My sweet Ari, there may be moments in your life when the world feels too big, too quiet, or too empty. When that happens, I want you to close your eyes and remember that you were born from love, so much love, more than I ever knew I was capable of feeling." Ariella leaned closer, absorbing every word. "If I'm not there, look for the people who love you. They will guide you. They will hold you. They will remind you of who you are." Brant paused, breath trembling. Ariella whispered, "Keep reading." He continued, "You are brave. You are gentle. You are the brightest joy I ever carried. And even when you feel lonely, my love is still wrapped around you. Mommy. When he finished, Ariella's eyes filled slowly, not with the sharp grief from earlier months, but with something softer, something healing. She still loves me, Ariella said. Always, Brant replied. Her love didn't stop. It just changed shape. They made it a weekly ritual, one journal entry every Sunday. Some entries brought laughter, some brought tears, but all of them brought connection. Brant also began speaking more openly about Alindra, weaving her into conversations naturally. Your mom loved this song. Your mom used to dance like that. Your mom once said something beautiful about sunsets. Ariella started sharing her own memories too. Mommy used to braid my hair like this. Mommy said I had brave dreams. Mommy kissed my forehead every morning so I wouldn't forget love. Together, they built a bridge between past and present, one that didn't erase pain but honored it. One night, while tucking Ariella into bed, she asked, Daddy, do you miss Mommy too? Brant nodded gently. Every day. Does it hurt? Sometimes, he said honestly. But remembering her also makes me strong. Ariella touched his cheek with a small hand. I think Mommy is happy we're together. Brant felt his throat tighten. I think so too. Weeks passed, then months. Grief didn't vanish. It simply softened. The sharp edges smoothed into something manageable. Love filled spaces where sadness once lived. Brant learned to balance fatherhood and work, adjusting meetings around school pickups, arranging bedtime calls when traveling for short trips, and making home feel like the safest place Ariella could imagine. Ariella grew more confident. Her laughter became fuller, her drawings brighter, her questions deeper. She asked once, Do you think Mommy can see us from heaven? Brant smiled gently. I think she can see every moment your heart shines. Ariella pressed her forehead to his. Then she's seeing us right now. Yes, he whispered. Right now. The love between them, born from loss, grown through resilience, strengthened by devotion, became the heartbeat of their new life. Alindra was gone, but the love she left behind stayed. It lived through stories, through letters, through rituals, through laughter, and most of all, through the deep bond between the two people she cherished most. Her legacy, quietly but powerfully, remained rooted in every step they took next. Evening settled softly over the apartment, dimming the corners of the rooms and replacing sunlight with the warm glow of lamps. Ariella was in her pajamas, brushing her teeth with sleepy determination. Brant waited by the doorway, smiling faintly as she hummed the same tune she had hummed before Alindra passed, proof that some parts of childhood managed to hold steady even in the shadows of loss. When she finished, he lifted her gently and carried her to bed. Daddy, she murmured, laying her head on his shoulder, can you tell me one more story about Mommy? Of course, he whispered, placing her softly beneath her blankets. She curled onto her pillow, eyes half closed, waiting. Brant sat beside her and took a slow breath, letting the moment settle. Your Mommy, he began, had this way of making ordinary things feel magical. She could turn a walk to the mailbox into an adventure. She could turn a quiet night into something warm and full of laughter. And she loved you more than anything on this earth. Ariella's lips curved gently, sleep tugging at her eyes. Did Mommy think I was brave? Yes, he said, brushing a curl behind her ear. She said you were born with a light in you, and she believed it would guide you, even when she couldn't. Ariella blinked slowly, drifting. I think I can still feel her sometimes. Brant smiled softly. That's because love doesn't leave. It stays in the people we become. She snuggled deeper beneath her blanket. I miss her, but I'm okay. I know, sweetheart, he whispered, and I'm here. Forever, forever, he said without hesitation. Ariella gave a sleepy nod, and within moments, her breathing shifted into the peaceful rhythm of dreams. Brant sat beside her for a long moment, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. There was something remarkable about a sleeping child, how innocence softened the edges of grief, how hope slipped quietly into the room without asking permission. When he finally stood, he pressed a kiss to her forehead. Good night, my brave girl. He turned off the lamp and left the door slightly ajar, letting the hallway lights spill softly into her room. He walked into the living room and settled onto the couch. The journals sat on the coffee table, quiet reminders of the woman whose love shaped every curve of their lives. He reached for the first one, not to read, but to touch, to feel the presence she left behind. He leaned back slowly, letting the room wrap around him. He thought about the man he used to be, restless, goal-driven, convinced that success was measured by achievements, contracts, and applause. He thought about who he had become, someone learning patience, gentleness, responsibility, and a love deeper than anything he had known before. Grief had changed him. Fatherhood had softened him. But Elindra, she had transformed him. He whispered into the quiet room, "Thank you for choosing me, even when I didn't deserve it." The clock ticked softly. Outside, a few cars passed on the street, their headlights moving like small rivers of light. He closed his eyes, letting the memories drift in gently. Her laughter, her stubbornness, the way she used to tilt her head when she was teasing him, the warmth in her voice when she said his name. Love, he realized, didn't vanish with loss. It evolved. It continued forward in the way he parented, in the way he honored her stories, in the way he protected their daughter, in the way he lived differently now, slowly, deliberately, gratefully. Forgiveness played its role too. He forgave himself for the years he missed. He forgave the world for taking her too soon. He forgave time for not stretching the way he wished it would. And in that forgiveness he found something unexpected. Peace. Not the kind that forgets pain, but the kind that accepts it and still finds room for hope. Life rarely gives us advance notice. It arrives in waves, some gentle, some heavy, and asks us to walk through them with courage we don't always feel prepared to offer. Elindra's journey teaches us that love isn't measured by how long it lasts, but by how deeply it is given. Some people walk into our lives and leave footprints that never fade, even when their voice grows quiet. Brant's journey teaches us that redemption is not a dramatic moment. It is the daily choice to show up, to admit past mistakes, and to build something better than what was lost. Ariella's journey teaches us that grief does not break us when love stands beside it. Children remind us that healing is possible, not by forgetting, but by remembering with gentleness. And altogether, their story reminds us of something timeless. The people we love become part of the architecture of our hearts. Even in absence, they shape us. Even in silence, they guide us. Even in loss, they remain. Life will give us responsibilities we didn't expect. It will give us moments that feel too heavy to carry. But it will also give us people who make the weight bearable. Family is not just blood, it's devotion. It's presence. It's choosing love even when it hurts. And love, when offered with honesty, doesn't end. It continues in memories, in actions, in stories, in the ways we protect one another, in the way a father wipes a child's tears, in the way a daughter learns to smile again, in the way a woman's legacy lives through those who carry her heart forward. Later that night, Brant checked on Ariella again. She was asleep, curled on her side, one hand resting on the corner of the folded letter from her mother, a letter she refused to store away. Her nightlight glowed softly, casting a gentle halo over her small frame. Brant watched her for a long moment, absorbing the peace on her face. Here she was, safe, loved, protected. Here he was, honoring the promise he made to Elindra. Here they both were, two hearts stitched together by grief and rebuilt through love. He whispered, his voice steady. "You're going to grow into everything she dreamed for you." Ariella didn't stir, but her breathing deepened, as though her heart hurt him even in sleep. Brant stepped back, turning off the hall light. The apartment settled into quiet, and as he stood in the doorway, looking at the life he now carried forward, he realized love had not ended with loss. It had only changed form. It lived in bedtime stories, in school lunches, in early morning routines, in shared memories, in a little girl's laughter, in the strength he found inside himself, and in every tomorrow they would face together. This was the legacy Elindra left behind. Love that stays, love that heals, love that lights the path long after the giver is gone.